little background. This happened to me in July of last year. I was parked on a back road watching the fireworks from the 4th of July go off in a nearby town. By the time it all ended, it was pitch black out. I got into my 2004 Chevy Impala and turned the key, and nothing. I turned it again. Nothing, just a dull click. I had been driving the speeder for a while and had lots of problems with the hunk of junk. I flipped on the headlights and the hazard lights. I popped the hood as if I knew what I was looking at. I left the hood open and waited for someone to drive by and give me a hand. I tried to call for help, but I had no signal in the middle of nowhere. I walked around just trying to get one bar. I had walked pretty far from my car at this point. I could still see it, but I was at least a quarter mile down the road. Still no luck. I looked back at my car and I could see headlights parked next to it. Finally, some help. I sped walked back to my car and waved at the stopped vehicle, trying to get the driver's attention, which I must have because they rolled down their window and I heard a deep, husky voice say, "Car problems?" In which I replied, "Yeah, I think my battery died. I was parked here watching the fireworks in the sky." The man replied, "Fireworks? Oh yeah, it's the 4th, isn't it?" I thought that was kind of strange. How could someone not realize it was the 4th of July? But I brushed it off. I got tired of the small talk and said matter-of-factly, "So, do you think you could give me a lift to the nearest town?" The voice said, "Yeah, no problem. Hop on in." I thanked him and walked to the passenger side of his vehicle and opened the door, and was met with the most rancid smelling scent I'd ever smelled in my life. It was indescribable. It smelled of old sweat and rot, which I imagined was old junk food. It took everything in me not to puke. I entered the car and sat on his seat. It felt very strange. It was the firmest leather seats I had ever sat on, but the material was so soft. He put the car into drive and we drove down the empty back road. I rolled down the window of the car, just to have some air to breathe. We exchanged a little small talk, where I'm from, what I do for a living, and then the conversation started taking a turn. He asked if I had any family nearby. I said yes, and that they lived just a few towns away from here. And he asked me something that made my hand shake. He asked, "Do you think they'd miss you if you went missing?" My breath got caught in my throat. I swallowed hard and said, "I would hope they'd miss me." He sat there in silence. I looked straight ahead, but out of the corner of my eye, I could see him turn his head and stare at me. I felt my heart beat hard in my chest as he looked at me. It felt like an eternity before he cleared his throat and said, "I don't have any family anymore." I just nodded and listened to him ramble. "They're all gone after that." "Never mind. So tell me, what do you think is going to happen next?" I froze, not moving a muscle, petrified in fear. I just wanted out, but I didn't want to anger him. I could see the lights of the nearby town. It was only a few miles away, but there we were, stopped at the crossroad, with me having to make a choice. I wanted to jump out of the car and run, but I doubt I'd make it very far on foot. I cleared my throat and said shakily, "I'd really like it if you'd take me to that town to the left of us a few miles away, please." I saw his shadowed figure nod slightly, but we sat there in silence for what felt like hours, but was only a few seconds before I heard click, and then click again. He flipped his blinker to the left. My heart did somersaults of joy in my chest. As the car drove in the direction of the town, within 10 minutes, we arrived on the outskirts. He slowed to a halt. He unlocked the door, but before I left, he grabbed my arm, and he said in a very monotone-sounding voice, "You're lucky I like you. Otherwise, you'd join my collection." I didn't want to know what he meant by collection. I thanked him for the ride, and as I got out, I took one look back at the car. My window was still rolled down, and the streetlight overhead lit up my seat partially. I stood there in horror as I stared at the peach-colored wrinkled seats that I had been sitting on the entire time. The smell of sweat and rot made sense now. I was sitting on human-skinned car seat covers. I felt sick as I watched the car drive off in the night. Its taillights drove until I couldn't see them anymore. I never forgot that trip, and I don't think I ever will.